What is becoming fairly typical corrosion from a leaky cap at C2 has corroded the 7 discrete components to the left of it. Those will need to be removed and replaced. Here I have clipped the components off of the component side of the board, and then I heat the legs and lift them out with that gigantic looking side cutter. While testing this board, I found these 2 pins shorted together. They caused the 2 rows to light at the same time. Well, this isn't a pinball switch at all. This is a Leviton wireless controllable switch. You can connect this thing to your Alexa device or presumably your Google Home. This is a first generation switch. They're really, the idea of the switch is really nice. These first generation switches kind of suck because they fail fairly regularly. The second generation switches don't have these wire lugs. They have wires coming out of them, and you can either use a wire screw or I prefer these locking things that you can get nowadays. But it's one of the things I was doing recently. And here's the other thing. This you'll recognize as a 4-coil assembly for a washing machine hot and cold water supply, and it had failed. So being a pinball guy, we can fix anything, right? Well, this thing is probably clogged in the cold water side, and I'll probably run a wire through that and make sure. But these coils all ohm out at 100 or 1,000 ohms each, so they're probably okay. There's a connector that goes right there too. So the first thing you try is to clean these screens, and I did that, but still no joy on the cold water flow. Something to do later on, maybe a destructive test on this darn thing. Back to pinball. Here we are, a Getaway High-Speed 2 MPU and driver board. MPU came in with no faults. I installed NVRAM, configured it for USA 2 by clipping these 4 jumpers. I socketed U20. I generally do that on these WPC089 boards just to make maintenance easier. In later WPCS, WPC95 boards, they socketed them. Replace C31, J210, and a new reset generator is installed. On the driver board, and this is the main reason the client brought them in, C2 had leaked, and it was corroding the components immediately left of there. So I had to replace in addition to C2 and rebuild the trace, these 7 components I've replaced. You can see that right here, and I rolled in a picture of it. These traces are, well, they're scratched off. I scratched the solder mask off, but the corrosion had invaded below that solder mask and eventually would have severed the trace that goes to at least pin 1, which is a critical trace in the operation of this driver board. I also replaced all the power headers. There's the 12-volt header, the 5-volt, 12-volt and ground out. These are GI headers, replaced all those. And here's your other power headers on this side. Replaced C5, the only one of these large caps that you should really think about replacing. And I washed this board, so the last thing to do is to test it and make this video. And I will conformal coat this area because there might be a little bare copper there. Well, certainly there's some right there. So into test already. Let's test the switches. Come on, Mr. Phone, there we go. So these are the coin door switches. And we'll go across the switch matrix diagonal, showing all rows and columns are working. Excellent. Let's get to solenoid test and make it drive through all 16 solenoids. Sorry about that focus. I'm not sure why that's doing that, but I will figure that out. That long one that's going is the Mars lamp, which is the police light on top of the game. So all those solenoids are working. I'm going to do the general illumination. I've done this so many times I can tell these are all working, because if they all dim at the start, then they're all going to dim individually too. We can do the lamps and the flashers at the same time. So there's all the flashers operating and all the lamps operating. So this board pair is good to go now. That is all there is to test. Thank you so much for bringing this board by. I'm going to give you a text message to let you know that they're ready. And I do appreciate it.